Hello, it's Scott Neville from the Libertarian Party here. I'm standing for election in Brighton Hill South, that's in Basingstoke, and I've just come back from canvassing. So I'm going to share with you a few thoughts that I've had from talking to people out and about the estate. I did a video about 2 weeks ago where I just come back. I was walking along Gershwin Road and I had my camera phone up. This video is all stable, so I've decided to come back home and record this using a fixed camera that's stable in my spare bedroom. That's the high life of a Libertarian Party candidate. You know, you get to record these videos in your own bedroom. There's no second homes here. So there's two sort of main things that I want to talk about. The first is housing. Now, I appreciate this is going to kind of be a long-ish video. Because there's not really any policy here that sits in isolation. There's a number of different policies that all play together to make these issues occur. So the specific issue that people have spoken to me about is parking. Now, as I say, there's a lot of things that come together to make this a problem. The first thing is that when these estates were designed in sort of the 1980s, there was generally only one car per household. Not true across the board, but as a general rule, there's only one. Now that's changed somewhat, and that's changed for a couple of reasons. It's not just simply the fact that the children of the household are staying at home longer because they're struggling to afford housing. There's slightly more to it than that. And the reason why they're actually struggling to afford housing, there's more to it than the immigration issue that a lot of people give weight to. There's three things in my mind that are causing the house pricing to go out of reach of many young people. So we'll come back to that in a little while. So going back to the parking. Now, the reason that there's more cars per household is to do with the jobs that are on offer as well. Now, if you go back to sort of like the 1970s, you would see that most people would work a lot more locally to where they live. And as time has gone on, that sort of model has changed and people are living further and further away from where they actually work. Now, this is actually an expected economic change through the process of specialisation. That's what I think anyway. So even looking at my own life and where I used to live and where I live now, what I used to do for a living and what I do for a living now. So when I was a student back in college days and university days, I used to work weekends in Argos in Basingstoke town centre. Probably don't remember me there. So that is quite a generic role that a lot of people could do. It didn't really require any special talent as long as you could be polite to people and you could carry some heavy things up and down a collections desk. There wasn't a huge amount of skill that was needed to do it. I mean, it was hard work. I'm not saying that it isn't. It was really, really hard work, and there were some really long days. So hats off to anyone that does it. It's a hard job. But fundamentally, you don't need much specialist training. Now, when I was at uni, I was studying computer science because I love IT, I love technology, I love building stuff, basically. Now that I've got my computer science degree and I have a bit more free time to do this kind of nonsense, I work for a company that builds computer systems for the police. Now, obviously, that is a much more specialised role than walking up and down a collections desk handing goods out to people that have bought them. So in my own life, I've effectively leveraged myself up in terms of economics by specialising in a specific role which requires a much higher level of skill to do it. And this obviously gets me more pay, gets me a better work-life balance because there's no working on Saturdays and Sundays in an office job. It's the normal sort of 9 to 5 that I do Monday to Friday. However, as should be obvious by now, there is much more options in terms of working in shops. You know, I could walk into the town centre now and there's loads of shops there. There's shops in the Brighton Hill Retail Park. I don't have to go very far to get a job in a shop, basically. I don't have to travel very far. But to work for a company that builds specialist computer software, there's not many of them about. I don't even know if there's any in Basingstoke, because I work towards Reading. So I obviously have to travel more because there's far fewer of those opportunities about. And as we're encouraging our children to get more specialist education, they're going to need to take these jobs, which are further and further afield, because they simply have to concentrate a few specialists in one place, and there's less demand for those to be spread out all over the place. Whereas if you were just working in a factory, say, if you go back far enough, if you were working in Thornycrofts, you wouldn't have to travel very far to do it, so you wouldn't need a car. It's just not something that you would need. I mean, the shops would be fairly local. You probably walk past them on your way home. So because the economy has changed and the nature of the way people work has changed, that has created this environment where we need to have a car, or everyone that works needs to have a car. It's not really the fact that people don't care about the environment or anything like that. It's because of the way people are working have changing, or at least that's one of the reasons in my opinion. Now, the other problem is, or the other thing to consider, is why young people are staying with their parents longer. Now, I think there's three issues that cause this. There's the immigration, which obviously pushes up the housing prices. More people come in than leave, so you're going to get an increased demand for housing simply because there's more people that want housing than there was previously. But that's only one issue, one out of three, I think. The second issue is the ageing population. Obviously, as the population is getting older, we're living longer. The people that are living longer fundamentally need somewhere to live. So, they've got to have a house somewhere, or they've got to be accommodated somewhere. That is also pushing up the demand for housing. Interestingly, though, that's pushing up the demand at the lower end, because if you look at where a lot of older people live, it tends to be the smaller houses, which are easier to look after. And this is where the double whammy comes in, because obviously when someone starts out on the housing market, they want some of the smaller houses because they're cheaper. And the third and final reason is a social reason. If you observe sort of the makeup of a lot of households now, when young people move into their own home for the first time, they tend, more often than in the past, to live on their own. Whereas before they would have lived as a couple, or they would have moved in as a group of friends together. Now there's more often they're living on their own. And obviously, when you have more people that want to live on their own rather than want to live together, you're obviously going to increase the demand for housing again. And again, that's going to be at the lower end of the market, because no one that lives on their own is going to want to buy an 8-bedroom house. I mean, that's just crazy unless they're planning to get all their friends to live there. So this is creating all these pressures, which mean that we need more housing, basically. It's as simple as that, I would say. And you can't pin it on one issue, but this is ultimately creating this issue that's particularly relevant to Brighton Hill. So I'm sort of trying to get back to the parking point. That there's a lot of families that are bigger, where there's more people working in the same household, and that obviously means that they need cars, and therefore there's more traffic that needs to be accommodated on all the housing estates and all the roads that connect them up. So in some of the roads I've been canvassing, there's sort of a bit of a pattern with the way a lot of the housing and a lot of the parking is allocated. So it sort of goes garage, and then you've got this sort of green shrubbery to one side of it, which is about the sort of size, the same size as the two garages, basically. And then you've got two more garages, shrubbery. So the council obviously has to maintain the shrubbery. It's just generally a few bushes and the odd tree here and there, but obviously that has to be maintained. And now the garages themselves are sort of two garages in a block next to each other, and then there's a hard standing in front of them. So each garage effectively has parking for two cars, because there's one in the garage and one in front of the garage. Now it occurs to me that when you go around these estates, there's not really any children playing on any of the grass. So when I grew up in the sort of early early 90s, and a little bit perhaps of the late 80s, we would always go and play out on the bit of greenery that was out the front of the house. So me and the other kids, we would play football. Football and cricket were the two things we used to play the most, with the odd bit of climbing trees put in for good measure. But that just doesn't seem to be happening anymore. So, I mean, I haven't seen any kids playing on the grass today at all. Even walking to where I went canvassing and walking back home, didn't see any at all. So that begs the question: what is the point of having such an amount of green space? Should we perhaps consider consuming some of this green space to provide a little bit more parking? Now, because it's this effectively big enough for 4 cars, you could consume half of it and create 2 extra parking spaces, but still maintain the shrubbery at the back. The other thing that occurred to me is there's a lot of gardens in these particular streets. Now, they're all pretty well maintained. In fact, a lot of people seem to be quite house proud there. So I would wonder if people would be interested in maintaining that shrubbery as well. And then obviously the council don't need to pay for someone to maintain it, because the residents are maintaining it for them, or for themselves more accurately. And that would also mean that they could do something a little bit more interesting, rather than having a load of generic bushes, which are basically all the same. I met a couple of residents that were planting flowers in their own gardens, so maybe they would like to put more flowers there. I think that would vary the estate up a little bit and actually make it a much more pleasant place, because it wouldn't be every single one is completely uniform. There would be some variation there and it would look a bit different. So there's one thought on the parking issue. The other thought I have is that, and it's largely in the same vein, you've got these other big green areas. So a lot of the houses sort of go, you've got a house here, you've then got a garage in front of it, you've then got the road that sort of goes down in front of all that, and then you've got this big green bank, and then more houses the other side, because it sort of goes in an L shape. Now, given again there's no kids playing on that green area, but there are cars parked effectively on it, and there's also cars parked on the road. So if you had to try and get an emergency services vehicle down there, I think that could be quite difficult, because there's people parked on the road. There's obviously cars the other side, because that's where the car parking spaces are. Would it make sense to turn some of that green space into car parking as well, so that those cars that are on the road can get off the road and stop it being so clogged up, making it potentially a bit easier for any emergency services vehicles that need to get through, also making it easier for anyone that's actually parked in the parking area, because obviously you can't swing your car around too much when you're coming out of them, because there's these other cars parked the opposite side of the road. So I wonder if we could do something like that as well. I don't know how much any of this costs. I would need to look into that, and this is just my thoughts following going out speaking to people. It's completely unscripted, as well, as you've probably gathered. And the other issue, going away from parking for a moment, is the Basingstoke Festival. Now, I had a certain set of thoughts on this. I thought that there would be a lot of people that lived in Brighton Hill that wouldn't go to it. And actually, I'm correct. I also thought there would be a lot of families in Brighton Hill that would be adversely affected by the council tax rises, because the younger families seem to be the ones that get affected the most, because their cost of living goes up the most through various things that are required for schooling, and the fact that they effectively have to fund their own lifestyle plus the lifestyle of 2 other people, their children, if they're in a house of 2. And I was right with that. But I missed the obvious link. The parents might not go to the Basingstoke Festival, Basingstoke Live, but the children do. So there's not much appetite for getting rid of Basingstoke Live. In fact, there's a lot of people that think it's a really good thing for their children because they think it's safe. So I've changed my mind somewhat on this, and I don't think at the moment the funding from the council should be cut anymore. I've decided that it should be maintained. The sort of opinion that I've come to now is that the Conservatives currently control the council. They've decided that there will be a charge this year for Basingstoke Live. I think it's £15. Now, I want to see what this does, The Conservatives' argument is that this will enable bigger acts to come to the festival, and it will make it more popular, it'll make it more successful, and then it'll ultimately it'd be worth the £15 to you can justify the cost because it'll be really good. Now I've kind of come to the conclusion that I don't necessarily agree with this, but I don't necessarily disagree with this. I am going to look at what happens once this festival has occurred. That's basically what I'm going to do now. I'm not going to make any more judgments on it now. I'm going to say, let's see what this does, and then we'll go from there. So if this does make it really, really successful, and we could look at getting maybe some sponsorship for the festival, you know, some advertisers, Basingstoke Festival sponsored by some local business, Phillips Solicitors do a really good job with the Basingstoke Half Marathon, then maybe that's a way of reducing the council's involvement in it. I also think that perhaps there should be more voluntary groups getting involved in the running of the festival, because essentially it's for the people that live in the town, so why not get the people that live in the town more involved in the actual running of it? So yeah, I've changed my tune somewhat on that. I'm still adamant that the council shouldn't be giving any money to charity. I think a lot of people agree with me on that. Also, a lot of people agree with me that we don't want to see any more rises to council tax, because it's been a pretty shocker this year, with nearly 6% council tax rise for most people. So I think I'm on the right side with there. But yeah, that's just to say that I've changed my tune somewhat with the Basingstoke Festival. I don't think there should be any change at the moment now. Let's wait and see what happens with this new £15 charge, and we'll go from there. So if you've watched this through to the end, congratulations. It's quite a long video. Probably not the most interesting of topics unless you happen to live in Brighton Hill, or you know me, or that you're just interested in listening to some guy rambling on. If you've got any questions, please do get in touch with me. I'm happy to answer any questions. I will probably, with your permission, unless there's any personal information in there, I'll post them on my Facebook page so that everyone can see what I think on a particular issue. I don't think I should be having any secrets. I think everything every opinion I have on how the council should be run should be public knowledge. So hopefully you won't object to that. So I will leave it there now. Congratulations if you've watched it to the end. If you really want a prize for watching it to the end, maybe I could send you one of our rosettes. Maybe the first 5 people that watch it to the end. I want to see proof though that you've done it. Hope you have a good weekend. It's our British summertime now, as in the one weekend where it's actually sunny. And I'll talk to you soon. Thanks for watching.